What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp, managing editor, Fightful.com. We also have FightfulMMA.com. Maybe that's why you're here right now. Check it out. This weekend is a big, big show. UFC 242. We're going to have hundreds, if not thousands, probably thousands of comments over on our live coverage. We are joined by Joe Ferraro. And Joe, let me tell you, I am excited about a Saturday afternoon pay-per-view.
Yeah, that's going to be absolutely fantastic. I think you're excited for what happened last Saturday, but yes, Saturday's pay-per-view, Abu Dhabi, world title fight, 155 pounds. It's going to be fantastic, to say the least.
So let's go ahead and jump into it. I don't want to waste any time there. I really question, what should I even be covering MMA anymore? The lack of opportunity or chance that I gave Weili Zhang ahead of her just eviscerating Jessica Andrade, it really made me question some things. Because I'll be honest, that's the only fight I cared about seeing on this card. I didn't care that much even about Zaleski dos Santos or De La Rosa and Kai Kara France, as good as those fights looked on paper. I cared about this fight and this fight only. And Weili Zhang just obliterated Andrade in under 45 seconds, and now China and the UFC have what they wanted. They have what they wanted. This was so one-sided, such an ass whipping, and I owe an apology to Weili. She did it, and I didn't give her much of a chance, and I should have. I should know at this point that everybody has a chance. This was unbelievable, Joe. This was everything that the UFC could have possibly wanted out of this situation. They're going back to China, that's for damn sure.
I don't think you need to apologize to anybody. Most specifically, it's MMA, and you've been around this game long enough. I've been around nonstop watching this kind of stuff here that we can never not count out any fighter once they step into the cage or the ring. And this was a perfect example of an upset. Not many people predicted it, other than Zhang and her family, perhaps, and coaches and those that are close to her. But at the same time, this is MMA at its finest. This is when you realize that, I'm not going to bother watching this fight, or who cares? I'll catch up. You missed something incredible that went down live. A new champion was crowned in the women's strawweight division. Errors by Jessica Andrade, I guess, if you think about it. I mean, kudos to Zhang for landing those crisp right hands, those elbows. I understand there's conversation that back of the head, but she went in there. She had one job to do, and it's always much more difficult to defend a title than it is to win a title. And she did a fantastic job. Like you said, the UFC has their champion in China. I mean, Dana White's now coming out saying, there's going to be a champion from the Middle East within 6 to 7 years or 7, 8 years, something of that nature. But MMA is global. It always has been global. And if you do the math in what's out there, especially in terms of population and available fighters, when it comes to, the Chinese population, there are many. There are tons. Just look at this main event and the co-main event with Jin Lang. There's quality fighters there. It's just that, Sean, you and I and most of us in the MMA bubble, the talent that we've seen up until now, or up until Saturday, wasn't eye-popping, eyebrow-raising. But now you're going to start paying attention from anyone that comes from China.
Yeah, man. I was, how do I put this? Dumbstruck, maybe? Yeah. It was just unbelievable, the pain that Zhang put onto Andrade. And, a lot of people said, okay, well, maybe Andrade will face Rose Namajunas. Hear me out, Joe. and I don't know Rose personally. I'm more inclined to believe that Rose traveling to China to fight there is probably more enticing to her, based on what I've seen out of interviews and based on what I've seen from her from a character standpoint. She seems like the kind of person that would be like, China? Hell yeah, I'd love to fight in China. Because otherwise, she hasn't seemed like she was that interested in a title rematch or even fighting. And I don't know if that's where you want to put all your eggs in that basket anyway. Do I think that Weili will beat Tatiana Suarez? No, I don't. But I have been proven wrong by that woman as recently as last week. So that could happen again. Do I think that Tatiana Suarez could stop that swarm? Not necessarily, but do I think that Zhang could stop that double leg or an inside trip? No, not necessarily. Man, there's some real interest here in this division, and I'm all here for it. You got 4 names that are really, really interesting there in Suarez, Rose Namajunas, Andrade, and Zhang. Healthiest this division's been as far as top heavy in a while. I mean, because and Joanna is still around too, of course. That of course you can't just throw her name out. So you got 5 great names there. What do you think about the future, the immediate future of this division?
Well, styles make fights, right? And if you're going to sit there and go toe to toe with Zhang, it's going to be a problem. She's got an amazing amount of comfort for being in the pocket and throwing the right hand, right? Like she showed zero fear against Andrade, who will take you down and slam you. Just ask Rose. So each one of these fights and all the names that you mentioned and other ones that are in the top 10 or at least top 5, they all present different opportunities for different fighters, and it makes it wonderful for guys like us pundits that can break it down and try and be correct when making our predictions and our assessments. I mean, a lot of these fights now, with Zhang being the champ now, so many of these options and fights have opened up different possibilities and our eyes to think, oh, what would happen in this fight or what would happen in that fight? And you do your best to break it down on paper and verbalize it, but at the same time, they just got to step into the cage. And once they step into the cage, that's when we'll know our result. That's when we'll get our answer. And a lot of these fights, when you look at them, you just never know. It's MMA. It doesn't matter. We can go through this lesson over and over and over again. It's almost reoccurring. So many times you get a heavy favorite going in there against a massive underdog, and the underdog's like, I don't give a crap what the odds makers or where the betting money is. I'm going to show everybody else. And that's just how it is.
Zaleski dos Santos got upset as well. I didn't see that one coming. Honestly, thought that he was going to win that one. And that's a big, big win. For Zaleski dos Santos to go down to Li Jingyang, and we mentioned it was a possibility because of the style in which Li fights, and with 9 seconds left in the fight, mind you. That's a big one. Kai Kara France defeating Mark De La Rosa. Maybe not a big win per se, but number 10 defeating number 14. You had Keenan Song defeating Derek Krantz. Mizuki Inoue defeating Wu Yanyan. Anthony Hernandez over Jun Young Park. Su Madaji defeated Audrey Sukumtov. Sukumtov just got owned in that fight.
Well, we said that before heading in there. How much trust do we have in this guy?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Ibragimov got tapped out in the 3rd round. You had Ismagulov defeating Thiago Moises. That was pretty one-sided. Hailey Alatang defeated Dana Botgarel, unanimous decision. That went a little bit closer. And then Carol Rosa defeated Laura Procopia via split decision. There, as far as name value, it just wasn't there on this show. Li Jingyang and Zaleski dos Santos is one that would maybe make a pay-per-view main card if everybody was healthy. Maybe. I understand what they were doing. This was a one-person show. This was Weili Zhang and her quest to become champion, and that's okay. But if they want me to tune into these as a fan, they got to add a little bit more to this. Or they can develop new stars, which I get the feeling they were trying to do. They're trying to get some records padded here, and it didn't necessarily work. A couple of them did, but Joe, what stood out to you on this show outside of the main event?
Well, I mean, I kind of figured that co-main event between Lee and Dos Santos was going to be a barn burner. I thought it was going to end much quicker. I didn't think it was going to go nearly the full distance, minus 9 seconds. I thought one of these two guys was either going to get a knockout and or Dos Santos a nice submission, maybe a rear naked choke. But, I've been singing Jinglang's praises for quite some time. Keep an eye on him. He just seems to be, punching people out, like knocking people out. I think personally he's a fantastic fighter. Despite that loss to Jake Matthews, it was a decision. I get it. But this guy hurts people. This guy puts in a lot of power and a lot of his punches from his very first fight. When was that? Like 2014? Like he does good things, stands there and just won't go away. Very hard to defeat. He's been submitted before and he lost to Taleb via split decision. But this dude's a real fighter. People have to start looking at him. I'm looking at the rankings right now. He's still not even in the top 15, but he's going to be there. I mean, these rankings were updated yesterday, but he's going to be there. He's got fantastic skills. Of course, we want his last 3-4 fights have been in China, if I'm not mistaken. No, there was 2 in China, Singapore, and Australia, and then China, Singapore. I mean, the last time he fought in the States, for example, or North America was 2017. like to see more, like to see him come over here and try and build some name here. It's going to be really easy, in my opinion, for the UFC to really build a massive international Chinese following. Because, I mean, the population of China is global. I mean, if they were to come to Toronto, Vancouver, huge in Vancouver, same here in Toronto. I don't know what it's like for some parts of the States, but the Chinese population here is huge. So they've got two names now that they can definitely run with and really build if they tap into the right media to do that. But other than that, I mean, the first bout of the evening, the split decision, it's always weird when you got one judge going 30-27, another one going 29-28. It is kind of weird, but other than that, like you said, not much name value on this card. Fights are pretty good. Went the decision, which is always, yours and my worst nightmare if we can't watch it live. But at the same time, I'm okay with the results. I'm okay with the card, but not overly okay with the name value.
We have a ton of UFC news. A lawsuit has revealed the UFC fighter pay revenue. It has fallen at about 20% the last several years with estimates, but prior to that, it was like 16, 18, 19. This is low, Joe. Very low, and probably one of the reasons why UFC was able to sell for $4 billion. Yeah, right? Revenue in, revenue out, or expenditures out. There you go, right? It's one of those things where, so many of us have been standing on a soapbox saying these fighters deserve to be paid more, right? You never see this in the NBA, that's for sure, right? Like it's one of those things where, the attraction is the fighters, technically speaking, but it's the production of the company that really, and the marketing of the company that gets it going. So it's tough to say. I mean, you're going to see your LeBron James and your players and your teams 80 times within a 7 to 9 month span in the NBA, and same thing with other big league sports. You're not going to see the same name fighter that many times. You're not going to see them 80 plus times in that period. So it's kind of different when it comes to the NBA and the other sports. But at the same time, are we tuning in technically to watch the UFC, or are we tuning in to watch? There's the dichotomy there. Are you tuning in to watch the fights, or are you tuning in to watch the UFC? If you're a UFC fan, you're going to watch the UFC and the fights. If you're a fight fan, then you'll watch everything. You'll watch UFC, Bellator, Ryzen, and all the other organizations. But again, it's that question again. What are we tuning in to watch here? Reminder, guys, leave a thumbs up. Donate a super chat. We'll read your question or statement on the air. Tim Traver, thank you for your super chat. He says, anything can and will happen, just like wrestling, boxing, any sport for that matter. Weili Zhang proved that the other night. Phil DeFries did an interview with us recently and talked about his mental health issues. And he's fighting at KSW, where he's defending the heavyweight gold against Damian Grabowski. And he talked about the counseling that he's underwent. He was like, they offered me a lot of counseling. I was too anxious. I couldn't speak to anybody. I said I wouldn't do it. I can't do it. I thought all these reasons about why I couldn't do it. Thought about the battle with medicine. Thought about getting the medicine, all that stuff. How he didn't want to be medicated. Now he's saying that he'll happily stay on medication to help deal with his anxiety because it's helped him out. That is a very slippery slope and an aspect of MMA a lot of people don't talk about. You're going to fight somebody. Your anxiety is a widespread issue, Joe. It's going to happen, and not a lot of people talk about it, and I got to give Phil DeFries a lot of credit for talking about it to Harry Kettle. How often do you see somebody just coming out and being like, yeah, I'm on anxiety medication because I fight people? And I mean, Rose talks about it a little bit, not that she's on meds, but that she's had some issues. What do you think about this, Joe? It's something that's been discussed for such a long time. Go back to my interview with Pat Barry, and I was actually part of a UFC post-fight press conference when he emerged victorious, how he broke it down. My conversations with guys like the likes of David Loiseau and George St. Pierre way back in the day, Rich Franklin, fighting, even Kamaru Usman, he talked about the very first time he fought in a cage, the anxiety level that went through the roof. He said, you're just there in shorts and a cup, man. You feel naked and you're standing across. I mean, we can verbalize. It's like anything in life, right? You can describe it
verbalize it. You can add your verbs and adjectives and try and make it as succinct as possible. Until you've experienced it, you'll never be able to understand it. And I'm not talking about fighting. I'm talking about anything in life that requires to be at the top of your game, no matter what type of industry you're in. And for these guys and girls to step into the cage, it's a lot of them are trained fighters. They're killers, right? But there's a lot of nervousness that goes in there. I've known fighters that were heavy favorites, Sean, that have lost fights because of anxiety. And when I say anxiety, some of them have, they talk about, getting the mental health.
Perhaps even GSP several times. He's spoken about it at length.
Yeah, it's not difficult. And I know a lot of fighters that have lost fights on fight night because of the anxiety level. I've talked about it on this show many, many times that, let's look at a guy's perspective sometimes. I know guys that were perfectly fine after the weigh-ins. And something happened the night before, and I find out later they got into an argument with the wife, the girlfriend, they got bad news from home. They can't unfocus on the bad news or unfocus on about to get broken up with, or, because sometimes people can't deal with that's why so many fighters are single, to be honest with you. But there's guys in fantastic relationships that have the support that they need. Guys and girls have the support from their spouse or their partner that understand. I mean, listen, this is now you got to have that singularity mindset. And some people are just like, no, it's still about me. I don't care that you're fighting. We have this to take care of, or you said this to me, and I've heard stories where I was like, my goodness, like the night before a fight or the morning of at breakfast. How could you possibly now want to fight another human being that's also trained 8 to 10, 12 weeks to knock your head off? That's almost impossible. But it happens, and it happens at every single UFC event and every single big MMA event or small MMA events in general. And the mental part, we've heard it before, 90% of fighting is mental, 10% is physical. And people, those are numbers that are thrown out and words that are used, but people, if they don't really grasp it and understand it, one of the running things I used to do all the time, Sean, at weigh-ins and the day of the fight, I would never make my predictions until either after the weigh-in or as soon as right before the referee said go, because I would just stare at the fighter's face and facial reactions, walking down the actual ramp or walking down the actual aisle to the cage or to the ring, just to see mentally where their head is at. Carlos Parza used to play jokes with us all the time as media members. We would sit there and we'd stare at her like, oh my God, she's not even there. Like, what's going on with her? And then she'd go out and have a fantastic fight. So it's hard to predict, but so many times, and you can see when someone's hiding something. So fighting is tough, man. Fighting is tough. No ifs, ands, or buts, and it's not just physical.
I expect the fight between Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington to be tough. Kamate reports that it will happen at UFC 244 on November 2nd. I dig this. It's not like December, late December, early January. 2 months, get him in there. This fight's long overdue. I'm happy about it, Joe. How about you?
It's got to happen. I'm happy for Colby that he's got the official title shot now. Kamaru's better. He's healthy. He gets to defend the title that he took away from Tyron Woodley in a dominant fashion. So let's see some almost like closure and a new beginning to this welterweight division. Let's see which guy is the unified champ. Kamaru's a champ. Let's not kid ourselves here, right? But Colby earned the right to that title shot a long time ago. Went through all that crap with ATT as well as the UFC and all that stuff there. But they've got a marketer. They've got someone that they can market very, very well here in the UFC, and Colby Covington. At the same time, he can do it himself as well. So if he gets the backing from the UFC, you've got your modern day bad guy, your modern day Chael Sonnen, your modern day heel for all you wrestling fans out there. So I think it's fantastic. And if he becomes a champ, look out. It would be crazy. It's almost like I don't want Kamaru Usman to derail this insane lunacy that is Colby Covington, because I want to see it just expand even further. But I'm sure Kamaru's going to have other ideas about that.
Paige Van Zant was speaking to Ariel Helwani and said, quote, I make way more money sitting at home posting pictures on Instagram than I do fighting. With endorsement deals and everything I pull from social media, I would be at a loss taking a fight and focusing on that. That was the end of that quote. She was talking about how she's going to fight out her contract and see where she lands. I was stunned by the next statement, Joe. She says, quote, when I did my contract negotiation last time, the talk was, I can't pay you more than a female champion. And she goes, okay, but why are you comparing me to just women? All of us should be getting paid more in general. I want a significant pay raise, to be completely honest. I've been extremely accomplished outside the UFC as well as inside the UFC. 5 wins, 4 finishes, main evented twice, and I think something with those accolades should be paid more, end quote. I agree. She's a star, whether or not you want to say that she's a good, great fighter or not. She knows that she's worth more. I completely agree. And here's the thing. Even if she didn't have 2.3 million Instagram followers, I would think that. But I'm completely on Paige Van Zant's side here. Yeah, pay her more.
She's not the only one, right? And she's
Exactly.
100% right. She's bang on. If you start doing the math, and I had this conversation with a few friends of mine over the weekend in terms of, where I was back in the day to where I am right now, and how, my income has completely changed per se, right? And I said, you even look at some of the fighters, and one, like, for example, Paige is making boatloads of cash via Instagram, right? Boatloads of cash via her social media. You look at a guy like Elias Theodorou, who was making more money, from my understanding, was making more money from the stuff he was doing outside of the UFC than he was with the UFC. Now, the conversation you and I had back in the day, Sean, was, well, without the UFC, he wouldn't be who he is. He wouldn't have gotten the recognition that he has. So he kind of needs the UFC to continue making that money outside of it for a bit. Then you got a guy like Mikuro Asakura in Japan, who took out Yusuke Yachi, and his brother Kai took out Horiguchi at the last event. Mikuro Asakura, to my understanding, per month, okay?
Yeah.
Per month, from YouTube, gets paid $40K.
What?
$40K. His following, nobody knows who he is here, but Japan's big. Japan's huge.
Okay. Is that 40,000 yen?
It's same as American, pretty much.
Okay.
He's making killer money.
I was gonna say, if he's making 40,000 yen, that's about 370 USD. But, whoo, boy,
Yeah.
my God.
So there's ways to monetize your brand if you can get the following and provide the content that people will absorb.
Sure.
If you're just putting up training videos, it ain't gonna happen. It's what you're doing outside of there, and I want to be careful how I say this.
Yeah.
But Paige Van Zant is a good-looking girl. She's beautiful, and that will draw tons of attention to her, right? So, take that luck card and put it in your pocket, Paige. Continue to use it as much as you can without, obviously, making a fool of yourself. But good for her for making that kind of money. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I remember, who was it back in the day? I think it was Rampage Jackson when he started doing the A-Team movie. We started having a bunch of conversations about fighters in movies, and I wrote a piece. I remember saying, "What would you rather do? Would you rather do movies and make double the amount of money that you're making fighting in the UFC? What would you choose?" Not many people said I'd be fighting in the UFC. I'll tell you that.
I agree. Chris Cyborg may have revealed where she's fighting next on accident last week on Hawani's show. She said, "I passed through many cycles. And in a cycle, there's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. Invicta had an end, and then she goes, Bellator? Wait, no, not Bellator yet. Then she goes, UFC at a beginning, middle, and end, and Strikeforce." I think that her fighting there makes a lot of sense, and her fighting in Japan makes a lot of sense. And if you fight in one, you can probably fight in the other. I think it's the right move, Joe.
I agree 100%. She's going to open up more avenues with Bellator because Bellator and the relationship with Ryzen. Heck, we might see her if she could sign. We might see her on that Bellator show in Japan come December. I think December 29th, if I'm not mistaken, or December 28th. One of those 2 dates there. So it all depends. I think it's much better for her anyways. It's been painfully obvious from even before she got to the UFC that Dana White, quote unquote, is not in the business with Cyborg. Never has been, never will be. May have been for a brief period of time, but no, it wasn't going to happen. So good for Cyborg if she can sign that deal and get paid a fair amount of money and fight more. I'd like to see her fight more often. But good for her. If Bellator's the way to go and puts money in her pocket, great for her.
Rumble Johnson claims that he's coming back. Joe, you were at his last fight, I believe it was, right?
Yeah.
And after I saw that, I was good with never seeing him fight again. That was the most uninspired championship performance I think I've ever seen. He's wanting to fight at heavyweight. Keep in mind, he did fight at heavyweight against Arlovsky, beat him, and then said, "I will never fight at heavyweight again." He's got to go through USADA testing. He's filled out the paperwork. Assuming he got in the pool right after that, he'd be eligible for a March 2020 return. His age is not an old one for MMA heavyweights. Do you want to see him back? Any interest? What do you think of this move?
Personally, I don't have any interest. I don't want to see him come back. I think that last fight with DC, he already had 1 foot out the door before even stepping in to the cage, only because he had the business. He had some good business dealings and the whole marijuana landscape was changing at the time, so he was able to start profiting from it. If he wants to compete because all of a sudden he has the juices and the desire to be competitive again, and it's not for financial reasons, I'm behind him 100%. If it's for financial reasons, that sucks. That really sucks, and it puts a lot more pressure on Anthony to get a win, to get stuff done, depending on the contract and whatever he would sign. I don't think he needs to fight again. If he wants to because he wants to be competitive and whatever reason, hey, man, listen, it's not like I'm not going to watch. You're going to watch. I'm going to watch. Sure. That's what we do. But personally, I kind of like it when guys have had that echelon of a career and then say, you know what, okay, I'm done. I'm moving on to bigger and better things in terms of business. So hopefully, those business dealings didn't go sour on him and he's still profiting, but I'm sure there's other reasons behind it.
Frank Mir says that he's not happy about the Roy Nelson rematch. Well, that makes 2 of us, buddy. I saw Frank Mir this weekend, by the way, but I didn't speak to him. He says that they were like, hey, we want you to fight Roy on August 23 or 24, and I turned it down. I was like, I don't really want to fight Roy. Then he got an email where they were going to extend his contract and see if they could find him a new opponent. Well, lo and behold, they never found him a new opponent, and he didn't fight. So Frank came back and texted him and said, hey, can I get a fight soon? Do you think I'll fight before November? And they said, wow, we've got you pegged for Roy again. And he said, well, you guys aren't taking no for a fucking answer, are you? Like, what? Why do they want this fight so bad?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of with Frank here. Like, I don't get it. There's other options.
Was there like some amazing fight that these two had that I don't remember? Because I remember it being like a 3-round decision.
Yeah. Did you think it's one of those loser goes home, extended contract or not?
Maybe. Yeah, I could see that. Because, I mean, Mir has lost both of his fights there, and Nelson, I mean, has been long overrated. He's lost 3 in a row. He's like 1-3 in that company. I think if Javi Ayala fought him again, he'd probably win. But, yikes. Well, it's time to play Do You Believe Dana White? Our latest edition. Dana White says that Ari Emanuel is his perfect partner, that Ari deals with the banks and all that shit that's involved now, and that Ari just lets him do his own thing. Do you believe Dana White?
No, I do not believe Dana White. I think Lorenzo Fertitta was his best partner ever, and not Ari. But I'm sure with Ari, from what we know of Ari, spectacular, quote unquote ruthless end quote businessman, but smart dude, understands the business world and understands how to ensure business gets done. And sometimes his business gets done the Ari Emanuel way. But yeah, I'm not sure I believe Dana White. I think he's just being smart about it.
Dana White said that nobody wanted to fight Weili Zhang. She said everybody in line up to her had fights, couldn't fight, or didn't want to fight. Nobody wanted to fight her. Do you believe Dana White?
Not in a million years.
He also says she's going to make a massive impact in China. Do you believe Dana White?
Partially, yes, because she's the champion and she comes from China. So massive impact on a scale that's going to be so big. But in reality, when it comes to China, it's going to be so small. You know what I'm saying? The population is so big there that the smallest movement of a pie, or the smallest piece of a pie in comparison to North America, is huge by number standpoint. But in China, not really.
Dana White reacted to the Conor McGregor interview. He said, Conor and I talk at least a couple of times a month, and I think he needed to do that. I didn't tell him to do it. He did it on his own, and good for him. Do you believe Dana White?
Nope. I believe Dana told him to get in front of the media and start putting out some fires.
I agree as well. Around the sexual assault allegation that's levied around McGregor, he goes, I know zero about that. To be honest with you, the back and forth I've had with him about that is that it's not him, that it's somebody else, so I don't know. Do you believe Dana White?
No, because I'm sure he would have asked Conor about the situation, and Conor would have given him his side of the story, right? I mean, there's still allegations out there, and as far as I know, I mean, I could be incorrect, but nothing's been proven, and things have changed. I think I was watching a bit of a Dave Chappelle comedy thing on Netflix yesterday. Was it Dave Chappelle? I think it was Dave Chappelle, but someone had said, all you people in the crowd are my worst.
Yeah, that was him.
That was him, yeah. Because no matter what I say or do, 20 years from now, you're going to come after me, right? So it's one of those things, and that's the society that we're in right now. You've got to be, as a man, you've got to be smart with what you're whenever you're even trying to pick up a woman or try to do anything, you've got to be intelligent enough to realize that what you're doing right now could come back to bite you, 10, 15 years from now. Just be a gentleman, no's a no, just move on. So I don't know the whole scenario with Conor, but I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm not accusing the young lady of anything. I just hope the truth comes out, and we'll take it from there.
Well, we have UFC 242 coming up this Saturday afternoon. It makes me so happy to hear that. Oh, my gosh. I love it. If I were UFC or ESPN, I would push the fights back an hour. I would. You can kill enough time on the broadcast to where you still start your pay-per-view. Probably, one, I would condense it a little bit, which they've done, and I would start things maybe an hour earlier on pay-per-view. I mean, we don't need a 3-hour pay-per-view. 2.5 hours is just fine with me. But there's some good fights on this show, but it is a one-fight show as far as interest, as far as marquee value. And it hasn't gotten that much marquee value. But let's go ahead and get into it. Don Madge, South African superstar, minus 190. Faris Ziam, a plus 165. You have Omari Akhmedov, a minus 120. Zach Cummings, a plus 100. Nordine Taleb, a minus 120 over Muslim Salikov, a plus 100. You have Bilal Muhammad, a very familiar name and a major favorite, a minus 360. Takashi Sato, a plus 300. Timu Pakalin, a plus 175 against Atman Azatar, a minus 210. You have Laurent Murphy, a gargantuan plus 400 against Zybura Tukagov, who I understand at minus 500. I'm with that line. I completely get it, and I'm here for it. You have Marbek Tusimov, another name that I think this line is appropriate for. Taisimov at a minus 250. Diego Ferreira, a plus 210. And kind of rounding out some of the names that maybe casuals don't know. Sarah Moras, a plus 120. Lana Jojua, a minus 140. I think that one is fair, but Sarah Moras is never out of a fight. As I look at these, Joe, I always like watching Zach Cummings fight. Plus 100, not enough for me to put 5 on it, but definitely live. Don Madge has looked very good. I like him. Bilal Muhammad, I'm not going to pretend that I always enjoy his fights. They are usually boring, but minus 360, yeah, probably. Timu Pakalin, I think, is 175, maybe some value at plus 175. Tukagov, a minus 500. I think he's going to steamroll Murphy. But I look at Sarah Moras, and I'm like, okay, maybe her. Maybe her. I look at Taisimov, and I'm like, minus 250. I like that, too. I think these lines are pretty well constructed.
You give me... I'll take the plus 120 on Sarah Moras, as well as Diego Ferreira. I will take that at plus 210.
Okay.
I don't think he's done. I really don't think he's done. I think he's still got plenty of energy and juice left in that system. Whereas Tasimov will potentially beat the brakes off him, but you never know. I mean, look what happened last weekend in China. So just throwing that out there. But other than that, I mean, I think Bilal is too much of a favorite over Takashi Sato. I mean, I might look at Sato and say, you know what, 5 on it. Why not? Plus 300. Get exceptional value out of that. Bilal's a blue collar fighter. You know, yeah, he goes in for the finish, but he's blue collar. He's just going to grab that lunch pail, show up there with his hard hat, and just go.
And Takashi Sato, I mean, even though he stuttered in Pancrase last year, he stepped into, I think it was in April when he beat Ben Saunders, and just that left cross, that was something special. I'm not convinced that he couldn't connect with that on Belal Muhammad, so I'd probably pick him as one of my I got 5 on it. Now, there are some fights I'm real excited about. Andrea Lee, minus 230. Joanne Calderwood at plus 190. I've got 5 on Joanne Calderwood. Sure, at one point I thought Joanne Calderwood was going to have her run of this division. That didn't necessarily work out. Andrea Lee looked very good after since dealing with her personal issues with Donnie Aaron and that scumbag that's finally got caught and all that stuff. But she has looked great in the UFC. She's 3-0 there. It's crazy to think she's only had 3 fights. But Joanne Calderwood, man, I think she is still incredibly underrated. I know that she lost to Shikagian and she's not been consistent, but I think she is an excellent fighter. And when she's on, I don't think there are a whole lot of people at flyweight that are better than her. What do you think of this fight?
It's a fairly large odds because, you know, JoJo can sort of put off some magic, but I do see why Andrea Lee is a minus 230 favorite. I see why. I'm actually I'm edging with Andrea Lee here. I'm leaning towards her to pull off this victory, not because of the odds, but just because that not many people agreed with her assessment from her last fight that she was going to win. Right? Yeah. It was one of those things where it was like, you know, are we both that wrong? I remember the chat was kind of like, what are you guys talking about? And she emerged victorious. So I'm going to lean towards Andrea Lee in this fight here. I think she's a lot better than most people are giving her credit for, with the exception of the odds makers and the people that are putting down money. I understand it's Tuesday. We still have a ways to go until Saturday. These odds could sort of tighten up as we get closer. So
Curtis Blades a minus 485. Shamil Abdurakhimov plus 385. Now here's the thing. I got Curtis Blades winning this 8 out of 10 times, but it is a heavyweight fight. It is a heavyweight fight between two guys who are ranked. Abdurakhimov has won 3 fights in a row. He's won 5 out of 6. 2 of his most recent wins are knockouts, and that is the story. That is the thing. Now, granted, when he's made a step up, I mean, he beat Tybura. Tybur's all right. I don't think he's ever beaten anybody on the level of Curtis Blades, though. I think Curtis Blades is very good. Curtis Blades ain't going anywhere. I'm picking Curtis Blades to win this fight, but it's a heavyweight fight, and if somebody has proven that they have knockout power, I give him a chance. That being said, I think that Curtis Blades is going to drag Abdurakhimov down. I think he's probably going to grab wrist control, probably throw punches from the back or from a turtled position, and finish Shamil Abdurakhimov. But that line, man, that line gives me a little bit of hesitation, Joe. But I got all the time in the world for Curtis Blades. When James is here, he interviewed him about 12 times on the site. Like we had him on regularly. What do you think about this one?
Well, he's only got 2 losses, and they're both to the same human being, Francis Ngannou.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you a question before I give you my assessment here in terms of my prediction. In his last fight against Justin Willis, because of the hatred leading up to that fight, do you think he purposely dragged that fight on for 15 minutes?
I could see it. Based on the way that he acted, yeah, I could see it.
Okay, so in this fight here, I'm definitely going with Curtis Blades. I like your assessment. I think you're pretty much bang on with what Curtis is going to do. I don't think he's going to want to sit there and stand and trade with Shamil, even though I do think he's got the better striking. He might be like, you know what, maybe this is an opportunity for me to showcase my speed against Shamil and go for that knockout. But should he get in trouble, and you don't want to risk getting in trouble in the heavyweight division because one punch changes everything. But if he feels like it, I think he'll just take down Shamil at will, stabilize position, and then just start unloading and try and get that finish. I think he, as crazy as it sounds, Curtis Blades needs another, let's just say, dominating victory to really start raising some eyebrows again, because he did lose to Ngannou and then went the decision with Willis afterwards that I'm sure many people were like, yeah, Curtis Blades maybe is not as good as we thought he is. Well, he is as good as you thought he was. He's just got to be able to ensure that, you know what, he's number 4 right now. A dominant victory will maybe slide him past Junior Dos Santos,
sure,
put him at number 3. But if not, you know, he's just basically fighting to retain his number 4 spot.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. And not a bad fight to make here. It pads the card a little bit. Sure, why not? I'm okay with that. I dig that. I like putting people who are pretty good on a card, and if you don't have anybody in mind for them, give them something to keep them busy, make a little money. Sure. Why the hell not? Davi Ramos, a plus 260 against Islam Makhachev, a minus 320, and this line is right where I think it should be. This fight taking place, I mean, come on. We're gonna expect Islam Makhachev to lose this one. There's been nothing that indicates that Davi Ramos would give him a lot of trouble in this one. I mean, outside of what happened against Adriano Martins, that could happen. That could always happen. Because would I have expected Makhachev to walk into a punch from Martins? No. And did it happen? Yes. But Makhachev looks prepared. He looks prepared to target some of the top names in this division. And all due respect to Ramos, he's good in his own right. And there's 3 straight rear naked chokes. That was impressive. Like, over the course of a year, he finished 3 guys by rear naked choke. And I love that. All at different points of the fight, too. Like, early in the first round, late in the first round, early in the third round. That shows that he can threaten at various points of the fight. But, man, it's hard for me to go against Islam Makhachev here, Joe. And the betting lines reflect that. How do you feel?
You know, normally I would say, Ramos has speed. If he gets the fight down on the ground, he's going to do his very best to take Makhachev's back. It's pretty obvious based on the way he competes, and look at some of the victories that he has. The other issue I have is that good luck getting Islam to the ground, number 1. Islam will more than likely dictate where this fight is going to take place. So I picture Ramos on his back a lot. With his back on the mat, with Makhachev pounding away here. At the same time, Davi's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is fantastic. He's going to have to look for sweeps here or limbs that are left loose. And if the limbs are left open, he's going to attack a limb. But Makhachev, I think, is going to earn a unanimous judge's decision here, just pounding away, perhaps a TKO. Will I be surprised if Davi Ramos was able to take his back and in some way, somehow get that rear naked choke in? Not at all. That's what he does. That's what he's fantastic at. But at the same time, Makhachev is a grueling, blue-collar, Dagestani, Kazakhstan, whatever you want to call those dudes from that former Soviet Union murderers. That's what they do. They will grind you down until you are nothing.
The co-main event, and normally when somebody loses 3 out of 4, I do not pick them. I don't want them in a co-main event. Edson Barboza, I'm just like, all right, I know this fight's going to be good. He's a minus 150 against Paul Felder, who is a plus 130. And it's not a big enough line for me to put 5 on it, but, I mean, Paul Felder has won 4 of his last 5. Barboza's lost 3 of his last 4. Now, granted, let's look at the people in history who have beaten Edson Barboza. Justin Gaethje, Kevin Lee, and we're talking like a Kevin Lee looked like he'd be something. Khabib Nurmagomedov, Tony Ferguson, Michael Johnson, and a lot of you might go, Michael Johnson, I can't explain him. But Donald Cerrone and Jamie Varner. Paul Felder, on the other hand, has dropped fights to Barboza in the past, Ross Pearson, Francisco Trinaldo, Mike Perry, a much lower level of opponent. And that Barboza fight happened, 4 years ago, and it went to a decision. Do you think that Felder has improved enough since then to be able to sway things? I mean, with those years, he's 35 years old now. Edson Barboza is actually still younger than him. I feel like Barboza probably has more cage miles, but as we've seen, that doesn't always necessarily matter. That seems to be less of a factor as we go on, unless your name is BJ Penn and you're getting knocked out by fat slobs in the street.
Jesus.
But how do you see this one going?
It's such a hard fight to break down.
Yeah.
Right? Like your assessment of Paul Felder, how has he improved since then? Of course he's improved since then. This is a stud of a fighter. Guy that spends a lot of time in the gym, guy that shows up to call UFC events and spends a lot of time in the workout rooms, trying to get someone to hold pads from coaches that he may have competed with fighters against. So he's fantastic. I think it's just a matter of it's so tough because Barboza's taken so much punishment and can unleash absolute highlight reel knockouts and finishes and leg kicks, and you just never know. But when he gets hurt and starts backpedaling, things get ugly. So it's one of those. It's hard to say. It's not who wants this fight more, because I don't know if many people want to win more than Paul Felder. That guy there is just an absolute animal when it comes to once he steps into the octagon or in a cage in general. If he can withstand the leg kicks, and I think he can, believe it or not. I never thought I would say that about an Edson Barboza fight, but I think Paul Felder has enough Muay Thai technique to withstand those kicks unless he cannot check them. If he can't check them and Barboza ties them perfectly and he starts destroying the calf and the thigh and the hamstring, that's going to be a short night for Paul Felder. But he's taken those kicks before. He's a Muay Thai fighter as is. So, speed kills. Barboza has the speed, in my opinion. But Felder can take it. Felder can take a beating and just keep on moving forward. So it's all a matter of if Barboza can finish him early, we'll say, first to mid-second round, good for him. He'll be able to do it. If not, Felder's going to, I think, pick him apart and eventually TKO him.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that assessment. I'm real interested in this fight. This is a good fight. I do feel like it should have been third from the top. I think that something else should have been wedged in here. Some sort of contender fight should have been the co-main.
Yes, of course. That's the way it should be, right?
You know what it should have been? Or it should have been Tony Ferguson against Absolute Scrub. That's who it should have been. Tony Ferguson against Absolute Scrub. Tony Ferguson shows up, makes championship weight, beats the brakes off of somebody. If somebody falls out of this main event, Tony Ferguson slides right in. That's what should have happened. Both Poirier and Nurmagomedov agree Tony Ferguson should be next. Refreshing to hear that. It is embarrassing how much Tony Ferguson has been overlooked. Embarrassing. We've got a bunch of people running around in the UFC without championships that won them and never lost them. Just a gaggle of people. It's embarrassing. But what isn't embarrassing is this main event. Khabib Nurmagomedov, he is 27-0. He is the lightweight champion. He will take on the interim champion, Dustin Poirier. Khabib a minus 450. Poirier at plus 360. And Joe, when I see that, I always think back to one thing. I think back to Khabib Nurmagomedov getting rocked. I think back to when he fought Michael Johnson almost 3 years ago. Michael Johnson, the guy that we talked about earlier, who has stood in there despite his 19-14 record, has beaten some of the best in this division. He's beaten Poirier. He's beaten Barboza. He's beaten Ferguson. Like, he's when you look at the people he's beaten, he's got almost a Hall of Fame resume. And, of course, the GOAT, Artem Lobov. But he almost put down Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now, what does Michael Johnson have to do about this? Very little. What does Michael Johnson's hand have to do about this? A whole lot. Because, dare I say, Dustin Poirier has better hands than Michael Johnson. Despite the result of their fight 3 years ago, which blows my statement out of the water, I think that Dustin Poirier has a better motor. I think he is more accurate. I think that he has as good of a chance to beat Khabib Nurmagomedov as Conor McGregor did. Now, granted, that didn't work out too well for McGregor. How do you see this fight going?
Nurmagomedov does what he does best, man. He's going to take Poirier down.
He does it real well. He does it real
well. Yeah, I'm of the opinion Poirier has spent the majority of this training camp on his back, getting up. On his back, taking a beating, getting up, and unleashing on whomever wants to stay in there with him. This is going to be, and Dustin Poirier has a boatload of MMA miles on him. Let's not kid ourselves. This guy's been around for a long time. There's a couple documentaries out there that he's in that you can really see what he was doing when he was young.
Yeah.
But Nurmagomedov is incredible. Is something special. For a guy that's been competing for a while, he hasn't taken that much damage.
Yeah.
He's been rocked. He's been rocked. But have you seen the size of his chin? I mean, you could back a Ram truck into his chin. He probably still won't get knocked out. He's just the guy's a monster. And he'll probably try and dominate the Mack truck or the Ram anyways. But Poirier is one of those guys that has been around. He's seen it all. He'll be ready. He's going to be ready. And it's just a matter of how much can he take? Because Nurmagomedov has that ability to take people down and suck the will to win out of them to the point where he starts yelling at them, tap out. It's better for you. Tap out. Just, Dana, make this guy tap out. Tap out. It's just not going to stop. And that's what he does. So if Poirier can get over that mental block, and believe me, Poirier's tough as nails.
Sure.
This could be a fight of the year candidate. I'm not saying fight of history candidate, but we're going to see a true test of Poirier's heart in this fight here, because Nurmagomedov I think is going to dominate him. But one mistake from Nurmagomedov, and Poirier's got some power and some accuracy. I believe he is the current, if I'm not mistaken, he's the current underground champ, because he beat Eddie Alvarez, right? Because Eddie Alvarez beat Justin Gaethje. What's that title? Title called?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, so he's the current underground king champ, right? So just got to be careful here. So if you're Nurmagomedov, don't get tagged. I mean, it's pretty freaking obvious, but at the same time, you don't want to get tagged by Poirier. Do what you do best and dominate him, because if you do not and you give Poirier the slightest opportunity to bust your chin open, he's going to do it.
That's UFC 242. I will be here for a post show after that. We will talk about Bellator at some point after it completes, but we're going to give quick predictions of Bellator 226, Bader versus Congo. We will go through the opening round featherweight Grand Prix fights. Sam Cecilia, Pedro Carvalho. I'm going with Carvalho here. Who do you got, Joe?
Carvalho, yeah.
A supremely interesting fight to me. The 5-0 Taiwan Claxton against the 18-4 Emmanuel Sanchez. Both men looking to break through, but both men at different points of their careers. If Claxton wins this, I'm going to have a hard time doubting him in the future, because Emmanuel Sanchez is very good. But I got to go with Sanchez based on the experience factor, Joe. How about you?
I'm going to go with Claxton. I think Claxton pulls this off. Yeah.
Pat Curran, 23-8 against Adam Borix, 9-0. I think Borix gets it done. Pat Curran has had some consistency issues in the past, but is a former Bellator champion. I mean, it seemed for a while he was one of those guys that was on the carousel. He just turned 32. He's won 3 of his last 4, but has not fought more than once a year in a while. How do you think this one goes?
It goes back to our MMA mileage question, right? Pat Curran has taken a lot over the years. Borix is probably a guy that's going to do whatever he can and use that factor there and just do what he can to tag Curran and take advantage of that chin, because there was a time when Pat Curran, his chin was fantastic, but there's only so much the body can do, right, and so much they can take. So, but on the flip side, my gut is telling me Pat Curran, just from experience. So it's tough to say. You know what? I'll just go with Curran on this one.
Up next, we have Daniel Strauss, former champion, against Derek Campos. I got to go with Strauss here. I think that he is just a higher level. He's 25-8. Campos is 19-9. I'm looking for Strauss up next. And what I don't want, however, is for this to lead to another Strauss-Curran fight afterwards. Bellator loves that stuff, Joe. But I got Strauss winning here.
Trilogy bout on the horizon. I've got Strauss as well.
Then the main event, it's a pretty good main event. It might not be on paper because, let's be honest, it's a Czech-Congo fight, and Ryan Bader has had this history as well. But quite frankly, Joe, Czech-Congo has never been better, ever. The man is 44 years old, and in succession, he has beaten Alexander Volkov, among other people, Tony Johnson, Javi Ayala, Timothy Johnson, Vitaly Minikov. He's on an 8-fight winning streak, Joe. That's the most of his career. He had never had beyond a 4-fight winning streak, ever. And he's taken on Ryan Bader, who is just special these days. Ryan Bader has that outstanding wrestling. He's not afraid to use his hands these days. And what we're seeing out of Ryan Bader is him going to Bellator, and now he's finished 3 of his last 4 opponents. He's beaten Fedor, Matt Mitrione, King Mo, Linton Vassell, Phil Davis. Oh, and by the way, in his UFC run, Little Nog, Elir Latifi, Rashad Evans, Phil Davis, OSP, Fei Zhao, Rampage Jackson, Vladimir Matyashenko, Keith Jardine. Like, he has beaten a several generations of fighters, even though that it seems like the fighters that he's beating are stuck in the last generation, except for Phil Davis. I'm interested in your take on this fight.
Ryan Bader's so overrated.
Really?
No, I'm kidding. I said he's defeated. He's amazing. But I was just thinking to myself, how surprised would I be when I'm sitting on my couch watching this, and all of a sudden I see a text or a tweet, from Sean Ross Sapp, and it says, "Holy shit, Czech Congo was the Bellator heavyweight champ." Right?
Could you imagine?
That kind of stuff wouldn't surprise me, but I'd be kind of like, "Oh shit, yeah, that's what just happened here."
Wolf Slayer, never die.
Right? There you go. I think Bader wins this fight.
I do think it'd be funny. Who was it? Remember Wolf Slayer? It was like him and Rampage and Bisping.
Yeah, back in the day.
All 3 of them as world champions eventually.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I would find that hilarious because you would expect if any of those people were going to be champions, Bisping would have been years before he was, and Congo would have been years before he was. Oh man, we'll have results.
Hits like a truck, though, man. Hits like a truck. So Bader cannot afford. It's a different division. As crazy as it sounds, 205 and 205 and up, there's different power being generated, man. So Bader's got to be very careful. Got to use that speed. Has to be smart and just don't underestimate Congo. I don't think he is. Just don't do it, because Congo will shut you off, shut you down, turn your lights off real quick.
Well, hopefully you guys generate some thumbs up and subscribe. This is also available on our MMA channel, youtube.com/Fightful MMA Boxing. We post clips, interviews, news videos, and lots more. Follow Joe at Joe A. Ferraro. Follow me at Sean Ross Sapp. Until next time, guys, we're out.